In August of 1914, Russia entered World War I against Germany with support from the Serbs along with their French and British allies. During this time, their economy was developing yet struggling, which resulted in a disadvantage against their rivals. The current leader was Nicholas II, who was frowned upon by many Russian citizens. Under his rule, Russia faced many hardships and continued to dig deeper and deeper into poverty. Eventually, Russians began to believe that if he was removed from power, they would be able to stabilize their country, which at the time was unstable. There was a conflict in the government, and there needed to be a compromise. This was the start of a revolution, a Russian revolution. When World War I started on July 28th, Russia was completely unprepared. Though the army contained 6,553,000 men, there was a limited number of 4,652,000 rifles. This meant that untrained troops had to go into battle without ammunition. In addition to this hardship, there were many military disasters at the start of the war, leaving Russia running to catch up. Russia's first battle was the Battle of Tannenberg against East Prussia. The plan was to take over East Prussia, then move on to Berlin. However, when they went to take over, they did very poorly. This resulted in more and more Russian people wanting Nicholas II off the throne due to his poor leadership. One of the reasons for war was because of Nicholas II. The war with Germany had been going on for a while, and the Russian people wanted it to end. There were many people, like the Bolsheviks, offering to end the war. The Bolsheviks were a branch that made up the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. People wanted them on the throne and Nicholas II off. In addition, Nicholas II was not taking anybody else's advice and only cared about himself. George Buchanan, a Russian diplomat, was able to meet Nicholas II during this time of chaos. In George's book, My Mission to Russia and Other Diplomatic Memories, he stated what he thought about the Tsar after meeting him. His book reads, all that they wanted was a government that would carry on the war to a victorious finish. The Duma would be satisfied if His Majesty would but appoint as President of the Council a man in whom both he and the nation could have confidence, and would allow him to choose his own colleagues. In addition, a letter was sent to Nicholas II by Alexander Mikhailovich, the son of Grand Duke Michael Mikhailovich. In this letter, he writes, I repeat once more, it is impossible to rule the country without paying attention to the voice of the people, without meeting their needs, without a willingness to admit that the people themselves understand their own needs. Nicholas even proves this himself in a meeting by stating, I choose my ministers myself, and do not allow anyone to influence my choice. This goes to show that people had no say in the Russian government at the time, and that there needed to be a change. While most of the world was using the Gregorian calendar, Russia was using the Julian calendar. The difference between these two calendars is that the Julian calendar is 13 days behind the Gregorian calendar. The first part of the Russian Revolution actually started on March 8th, but the Julian calendar is why it is also known as the February Revolution. During this time, Russian people wanted to revolt because of the limited amounts of food. In December of 1916, a blizzard along with a lack of fuel prevented many farmers from harvesting crops. People turned towards Nicholas II, yet he didn't set up any imports. Nicholas's actions with this issue would soon turn Russia into a country of crisis.
One of the biggest impacts of the Russian Revolution was from March 4th to March 15th. As short as a time span as it is, these mere 11 days made a huge difference. The Russian people started to realize that the conditions could only get worse. They knew that they had to take control of the situation. This is when they started the revolt. On March 4th, 1917, workers in the Putilov engineering factory, located in Russia's capital, Petrograd, demanded a 50% increase in wages so that they could afford food. When the management refused, they decided to go on strike. This was a big deal because this factory was one of Russia's largest factories.
On March 8, 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital to complain about the bread shortages. The women proclaimed this day National Women's Day. Soon, 30,000 workers and many students joined. Nicholas II didn't see this as a big problem and thought of them as a minor annoyance. He sent a few amount of soldiers to report on them, and would soon learn that this was a bigger problem than it seemed. At this point, the riots were starting to get out of hand. The Duma told Nicholas II that people were begging for him to release the emergency food supply. In response, he refused and ordered for the riots to be stopped by March 10th. On March 11, 1970, soldiers descended and claimed yet another riot. Later on, the soldiers took part in protesting instead of stopping it. Several factories began to form a group known as the Petrograd Soviet of Workers, which represented the workers on strike in Petrograd in this revolution. Robert Bruce Lockhart wrote in his diary on March 13, 1917 about the riots in the city of Moscow. It states, "Troops come all over, no bloodshed, and the crowd on the whole very orderly. No news from Petrograd." On March 14, 1917, Nicholas II finally abdicated the Russian throne, ending Imperial Russia and the Romanov dynasty. He made this announcement stating, "Today I am addressing you for the last time, my dearly loved armies. I have abdicated for myself and for my son, and I am leaving the throne of the emperors of Russia. I urge you to fulfill your duty and to valiantly defend your Russia. Obey the provisional government." The new government consisted of the provisional government and the Petrograd Soviet. The Petrograd Soviet held the real power and had the final say in the provisional government's decisions. This changed the Russian Empire into the Russian Republic. Lenin, the party leader of the Bolsheviks, returned to Russia from Switzerland with help from the Germans in hopes he would get Russia out of the war. When the provisional government continued Russia's involvement in World War I, 500,000 Russians, especially members of the military, went to protest in Petrograd. The time of these riots were known as the July Days. The provisional government accused the Bolsheviks of being in charge of the riots, despite their denials, and arrested them. Alexander Kerensky took power and became head of the provisional government. He decided to continue with World War I. In response, General Kornilov ordered an army of soldiers to march to Petrograd in hopes of restoring law and order. Kerensky gave a warning to cease the march, but the army marched on. He then asked the Petrograd Soviet to help, and the Petrograd Soviet did by calming the army down. The Petrograd Soviet released the Bolsheviks. Meanwhile, workers were now unhappy with the provisional government. Lenin returned back to Russia, where he and the Bolshevik Military Revolutionary Committee were planning a military rising. The Bolsheviks made their uprising public to gain more supporters, sparking the October Revolution. The October Revolution was the last stand the Russian people and the Bolsheviks took against the provisional government. Led by Lenin, the Bolshevik army soon took over most of Petrograd. Military forces began surrounding the Winter Palace, which was where the provisional government's base was. Eventually, the Bolsheviks managed to break into the palace, which caused the provisional government to surrender. They then took back most of their former lands, which was separated from Russia during the revolution and the war. A new government was formed with Lenin as the new leader. Lenin eventually gained more and more power and soon became the new dictator of the first ever communist state. This marked the end of the Russian Revolution, yet it was only the beginning of a new age. There are many mixed opinions on the communist form of government in Russia. While some citizens liked the idea of a communist society, others disliked it and believed that there should be a change in government. This created a huge conflict in all of Russia and led to the development of two new groups, the White Army and Red Army. The Red Army contained Bolsheviks and people who believed in the ideas of Lenin's government. The White Army consisted of anti-Bolsheviks and former leaders of Russia, who believed that a communist form of government was wrong. But dispute between the two groups grew bigger and bigger, resulting in the Russian Civil War. This war lasted nearly 5 years and resulted in the Red Army winning the war. This brought great change to Russia and also led to the development of the Soviet Union, a nation that stood for 74 years. In the beginning, Russia was an autocratic monarchy with many problems that arose during a time of hardship. A revolution was the people's idea of taking a stand to the problems that they faced. Without this uprising, Russian citizens could have never been able to strive away from the cruel and devastating monarchy. There was a conflict in the government and nation, and a compromise was established. This was done through the events of the Russian Revolution.